I'm back to my School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership shirt. Started out to be a pretty good thing. Um, Again, it's discussion, lectures, and so forth at ASU. Brought in order to bring more conservative voices, which is fine. But after a while, I stopped going because the speakers tended to be, one person with a very conservative approach, and it was no back and forth, which is what I always learned a lot from. Speaking of which, I want to talk about a state legislator, Mitzi Epstein, who has written to us constituents about some things that are going on, particularly regarding vouchers and a voucher program in Arizona that allows parents to use public money for private education for their kids. It's really what it amounts to. And she points out that there's a lot of, well, you always hear from Republicans, fraud, waste, and abuse, and so forth. And she said there's a lot of that in this program. People are using the money for all kinds of things. And it's public money. It's your taxpayers' money. Every time, if you're a young person working a minimum wage job, next time you get your paycheck, see how much is taken out in taxes. And you might want to know, what that money is being used for. And this is an example of it. And so the Republicans are trying to push this whole thing. And Epstein says very clearly that the whole purpose of all of these efforts Republicans make is to destroy public education. They don't like public education. Now, I'm going to give you my own take on this. All this charter school movement, voucher, so forth, they all came about under the guise of helping people who had not had access to good education, to wit, black students who were put through segregation, racial segregation, were put into inferior schools. And then in the northern cities, they were kept in what they called ghettos, segregated areas, and the schools were of inferior quality. So this is supposed to help black parents be able to take money that would be spent to educate their kid in a public school and spend it on a charter school or a voucher program, a private school, and so forth. However, that sounds good, but if you read historians of this, Diane Ravitch being the main one, you'll see that the purpose initially was to avoid having to send your kid to a public school which would be integrated, that is, would have black students in it. So this started in the South. They were called the white academies. And that began after the Supreme Court decision, Brown v. Board of Education. So just be aware of what these people are really about. Representative Mitzi Epstein makes it clear, and she doesn't bite her tongue, which I like. So speaking of the Supreme Court, we've had a couple of devastating decisions from the court, and I may have to look at my notes a little bit. But in one case, the Chinese religious sect, Falun Gong, was suing a company in the United States. And there is an act of Congress that allows foreign persons to sue a company that is registered on American soil. And what was happening was that this company was selling the Chinese government surveillance devices that allowed the government to round up members of this sect and put them in prison and torture them. And this is what was alleged. And the Supreme Court said, you can't do that, despite a congressional act that says, yes, you can. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Another one, interesting, had to do, again, with a non-white person. It's almost like a war on non-white people, who was a Rastafarian. If you know who Rastafarians are, think of reggae music and dreadlocks. But Rastafarian religion demands, like a number of religions do, that you wear your hair a certain way. And so the Rastafarians have what we call dreads. And this one person who sued had already gone to court. And the guards at the prison he was incarcerated in wanted to shave his locks off, or dreads. And the court decided, no, you can't do that. So he showed them this, and they said, the heck with you. And they did him anyway, held him down and shaved his hair off. So he went, filed suit, went to the Supreme Court, and the court said, yeah, you can't do anything about that. That's the end of that. And you can't go higher than the Supreme Court, except to the people. Now, we can't have referenda, amendments, and so forth that go to the people at large. But that's pretty hard to do. And then I'm going to have to look at my notes again here. Another one was that the temporary protective status had been given to people who came here seeking asylum and were in danger of meeting a bad end if they returned or were returned to their country. So they're allowed to stay here under temporary protective status. Now, again, we get to this racist angle. The people they ended this for were Haitians, people from Haiti. Haiti is a country in really bad shape. And Donald Trump has a term for countries that are not only in bad shape, poor, bad governments, but also black, okay? He calls them shithole countries. And has very specifically stated that he doesn't know why we can't have more immigrants from places like Norway and Sweden. Norway and Sweden, of course, are occupied primarily by white people. So he didn't come right out and say, we don't want any more blacks coming here. But everyone knew exactly what he was talking about. And I have a saying that I'll have to get the courage to tell you. A very famous political operative said what politicians can get away with. They used to be able to get away with using the N-word. Well, they can't do that anymore. So they use other terms, shithole countries, for example. So that is going to affect these people in a really, really bad way. And then double check here to see what other dirt they've been shoveling out. So that's the TPS case, temporary protected custody. So you need to know that one. And I think there was something else. Let's see. Oh, yeah. There's the federal government gives states money, but there are conditions, okay? And one of those conditions is that you, I'm going to have to stop here a second and find this. Lander. What did Lander do? Yeah. Well, that was the thing, the religious, So that's really what led to that issue with the guy with the dreads. That, that's what it was. That because you have a religion, and this goes back also to Native Americans. There was a big thing a long time ago about them being able to use peyote in their religious services because peyote was considered an illegal drug and so forth. Well, anyway, we're getting long on this, but I thought I would show you that in the long run, The purpose of the six conservative members of the Supreme Court is to turn this back to a white-controlled, Christian-controlled country. And that's what it is. So if you want to hear more of my I've got a great one for misogyny. We talk about misogyny. There's a guy in a comment section, and what he said about women, you got to hear. It's well laid out, and it makes some of these horror stories about what happens to women, but he wants it done. He wants this to happen. So I'll read that to you next time. Okay. Subscribe, like, do whatever you like. Bye.